May 1945. The Pacific Ocean, near Okinawa. The USS England, a Buckley-class destroyer escort, is hunting. Her sonar operator has detected something, a faint contact, moving slowly beneath the waves. It's a Japanese submarine, probably trying to infiltrate American supply lines supporting the Okinawa invasion. For years, submarine warfare had been a deadly cat-and-mouse game. The hunter would detect a submarine, race to the spot, and drop depth charges over the stern, explosive barrels that sank to a preset depth before detonating. The problem: by the time the depth charges exploded, the submarine had moved. The hunter was essentially bombing where the submarine had been, not where it was. Submarines knew this. They'd dive deep, change course, go silent. Most depth charge attacks failed. The odds favored the submarine. But the USS England isn't using depth charges. Instead, her crew mans a strange-looking weapon on the bow, a mortar that fires 24 projectiles forward in a pattern. The projectiles arc through the air and splash into the ocean ahead of the ship. Then they wait. The projectiles sink, armed with contact fuses. If they hit something solid underwater, like a submarine hull, they explode. If they don't hit anything, they sink harmlessly to the bottom. The sonar operator listens. Contact closing. Contact steady. Wait for it. Then, boom! A massive underwater explosion. Debris rises to the surface. Oil, air bubbles, pieces of the submarine. The USS England has just killed her first submarine using a weapon called the Hedgehog. She won't stop there. Over the next 12 days, she'll sink 6 Japanese submarines, the most successful anti-submarine patrol in naval history. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're covering one of World War II's most revolutionary weapons, the Hedgehog anti-submarine mortar that turned the tables on submarine warfare and shocked the Japanese Navy with its devastating effectiveness. Hit that subscribe button, because this is the story of how American ingenuity and a British invention combined to make submarine hunting go from a desperate gamble to a lethal science. To understand why the Hedgehog was revolutionary, you need to understand just how hard it was to sink a submarine in World War II. Submarines were arguably the most effective warship type of the war. German U-boats nearly strangled Britain with their attacks on merchant shipping. American submarines devastated Japanese merchant fleets, starving the island nation of resources. Japanese submarines, while less successful than their German or American counterparts, still posed a threat to Allied operations. The problem for surface ships was simple. You can't see submarines underwater. You can't shoot what you can't see. And even if you detect a submarine with sonar, then called ASDIC by the British, actually killing it was incredibly difficult. The standard anti-submarine weapon was the depth charge, a barrel. The standard anti-submarine weapon was the depth charge, a barrel filled with 200 to 600 pounds of explosives set to detonate at a specific depth. The attacking ship would detect a submarine with sonar, calculate its position and depth, race to that location, and roll depth charges off the stern or fire them from side-mounted throwers. This method had fundamental problems. Problem 1. Loss of contact. To attack with depth charges, the ship had to pass directly over the submarine's estimated position. As the ship closed to dropping distance, the submarine passed under the ship and behind the sonar dome. For crucial seconds or even minutes, the attacking ship was blind. The submarine could turn, dive deeper, or surface, and the attacker wouldn't know. Problem 2. Targeting the past. By the time depth charges sank to detonation depth, the submarine had moved. Even at slow speeds, a submarine could be hundreds of feet from where the sonar had last detected it. Depth charge attacks were essentially carpet bombing an area, hoping the submarine was still somewhere in the blast radius. Problem 3. Premature detection. Submarines could hear depth charges being rolled off the stern or fired from throwers. The noise gave them warning, precious seconds to maneuver, to dive deeper, to turn hard. Experienced submarine commanders became adept at evading depth charge patterns. Problem 4. Lethal radius. Depth charges had to explode within about 20 to 30 feet of a submarine to guarantee a kill. Outside that radius, they might damage but not destroy. The ocean is a very big place. Getting within 20 feet of a maneuvering target you can't see is incredibly difficult. The statistics reflected these challenges. In the early years of World War II, it took an average of 200 to 300 depth charges to sink a single submarine. Some submarines survived dozens of depth charge attacks. The U-boats that terrorized the Atlantic in 1940 to 1942 seemed almost invulnerable. The British and Americans desperately needed a better weapon. Submarines were winning the Battle of the Atlantic. If the convoys couldn't get through, Britain would starve and the war would be lost. Something had to change. The answer came from an unlikely source. A British naval officer with an engineering background and a radical idea. In 1941, Lieutenant Commander Charles Goodeve of the British Royal Navy was working on anti-submarine weapons development. He understood the fundamental problem with depth charges. You had to bomb an area because you couldn't hit the target directly. What if, instead, you could throw projectiles ahead of your ship? Projectiles that would only explode if they hit the submarine. The concept was called ahead throwing, and it was revolutionary. Instead of racing over the submarine and dropping charges, you'd fire projectiles forward while still maintaining sonar contact. The projectiles would arc through the air and land in a pattern around the submarine's projected position. The key innovation was the fusing. These projectiles wouldn't have depth fuses that detonated at a set depth. Instead, they'd have contact fuses. They'd only explode if they actually hit something solid. If they missed the submarine entirely, they'd sink to the bottom without exploding. This solved multiple problems at once. You maintained sonar contact throughout the attack. The submarine got no warning, no splashes until the projectiles hit the water already armed. A hit meant a kill. The projectile would explode on contact with the hull. Misses were silent, allowing for repeated attacks without alerting the submarine. The weapon was called the Hedgehog, named for the spiky appearance of its projectile pattern. The Mark X Hedgehog mortar consisted of 24 spigot mortars arranged in 4 rows of 6. Each projectile weighed 65 pounds, with a 35-pound Torpex warhead, more powerful than TNT. When fired, all 24 projectiles launched in a ripple, taking about 5 seconds to fire the full salvo. They'd arc forward about 250 yards and land in an oval pattern approximately 140 feet by 120 feet, roughly the size of a submarine. The projectiles were spin-stabilized as they flew, ensuring they'd hit the water nose first. On water entry, a small propeller on the nose would arm the contact fuse after the projectile had sunk a few feet. This prevented premature detonation from wave action, but ensured the fuse was live by the time it could reach submarine depth. If even one projectile hit the submarine hull, the 35-pound warhead would detonate on contact. Unlike depth charges that created a shockwave, the Hedgehog's contact detonation would punch through the pressure hull directly. Submarines had no defense against this. If you heard the explosion, you'd scored a kill.
If you heard nothing, you'd missed completely, but the submarine didn't know you'd attacked. The British began installing hedgehogs on escort vessels in 1942. The results were immediately promising. The kill rate per attack skyrocketed. Instead of 200 to 300 depth charges per kill, Hedgehog-equipped ships were achieving kills with single attacks. The Americans, impressed by British reports, quickly adopted the weapon. By 1943, American shipyards were installing Hedgehogs on destroyer escorts, destroyers, and some patrol craft. The weapon was particularly well suited for destroyer escorts, DEs, smaller, cheaper ships designed specifically for anti-submarine warfare. By 1944, the Hedgehog was standard equipment on American anti-submarine vessels in both the Atlantic and Pacific, and in May 1945, one ship would demonstrate just how devastating this weapon could be. The USS England DE-635 was a Buckley-class destroyer escort, commissioned in December 1943. She was named for Ensign John C. England, who'd been killed at Pearl Harbor. She was 306 feet long, displaced 1,400 tons, and carried a crew of about 200 men. She was equipped with the Hedgehog anti-submarine mortar, 3 3-inch guns, and depth charge racks. She was designed for one mission: hunting submarines.
In May 1945, the England was assigned to anti-submarine patrol near Okinawa as part of Task Group 51.1. The Japanese were using submarines to attack American supply lines supporting the Okinawan invasion. These submarines were a mixture of types: large fleet submarines, medium-sized boats, and even some midget submarines. Intelligence had detected increased Japanese submarine activity in the area. Multiple boats were trying to infiltrate the American screening forces. The England and her sister ships were tasked with stopping them. May 19, 1945. The England sonar detected a submarine contact. Her commander, Lieutenant Commander Walton B. Pendleton, immediately ordered an attack. The Hedgehog motor crew locked in the firing solution. Fire! 24 projectiles arced forward, splashing into the ocean in their characteristic oval pattern. The crew waited, listening to sonar. Boom! A massive explosion. Debris surfaced: oil, wooden planks, pieces of equipment. The sonar contact disappeared. The England had sunk the Japanese submarine I-16, a large Type C fleet submarine. First kill. May 21, 1945. Another contact. Another Hedgehog attack. Another explosion. The submarine RO-109, a smaller Type D boat, was destroyed. Second kill in 3 days. May 22, 1945. The England detected RO-104. Hedgehog attack. Direct hit. The submarine never surfaced. Third kill in 4 days. May 23, 1945. The pattern continued. The submarine RO-116 was detected, attacked with Hedgehog, and destroyed. Fourth kill in 5 days. By now, the England's crew was developing a deadly efficiency. The sonar operators could track submarines with precision. The Hedgehog crew could fire quickly and accurately. The ship's captain and officers were coordinating attacks with textbook precision. May 24, 1945. The submarine RO-108 was detected. The England attacked. The Hedgehog projectiles missed. No explosion. But because the projectiles were contact-fused, the submarine didn't know it had been attacked. The England maintained contact, adjusted position, and fired again. This time, boom! Direct hit. Fifth kill. May 30, 1945. After a several-day pause for refueling and resupply, the England returned to her hunting grounds. She detected the submarine RO-105. 1 Hedgehog attack, 1 explosion. 6th kill. May 31, 1945. The very next day, the England detected another submarine, RO-106. By now, the crew's confidence was sky high. They knew their weapon worked. They knew their tactics worked. They executed another textbook attack. Boom! 7th kill in 12 days of active patrol. 7 Japanese submarines destroyed. 7 Hedgehog attacks. 7 direct hits. The USS England had just completed the most successful anti-submarine patrol in naval history. The Japanese Navy was stunned. How could one small American ship destroy 7 submarines in less than 2 weeks? What weapon were they using? How were they achieving such accuracy? The loss of 7 submarines in such a short period was catastrophic for the Japanese submarine force, which was already depleted by years of combat. Japanese submarine doctrine had emphasized fleet submarines, large, capable boats designed to support naval operations and attack enemy warships. By 1945, most of these boats were gone, sunk by American destroyers, aircraft, or submarines. The Japanese were reduced to using older, smaller boats for desperate missions. The submarines the England destroyed were trying to disrupt the Okinawa operation, attacking supply ships, transports, anything they could find. But they never got the chance. The England's Hedgehog attacks gave them no warning and no opportunity to evade. The Japanese submarine commanders compared notes from survivors. There were few. Most of the England's victims went down with all hands. What emerged was a terrifying picture. American escort ships were using some kind of new weapon that could attack without warning and achieve direct hits. The traditional submarine defense, listening for depth-charge splashes, then maneuvering to evade, didn't work against the Hedgehog. The first indication that you'd been attacked was the explosion, and by then it was too late. Some Japanese submariners theorized the Americans had developed acoustic homing torpedoes. Others thought it was some kind of advanced depth charge with an acoustic proximity fuse. The truth, a simple ahead-throwing mortar with contact fuses, was almost more terrifying. It meant the Americans had solved the fundamental problem of anti-submarine warfare. By June 1945, Japanese submarine operations near Okinawa essentially ceased. The risk was too great. American escort ships, particularly those equipped with Hedgehogs, were simply too deadly. The few remaining Japanese submarines were conserved for potential use during the expected invasion of the home islands. The England's success wasn't an isolated incident. Other Hedgehog-equipped American ships were achieving similar success rates. The weapon worked. It worked consistently. And it was turning submarine hunting into a desperate gamble, into a one-sided slaughter. The Hedgehog's impact extended far beyond the USS England's remarkable patrol. By 1945, the weapon had fundamentally changed anti-submarine warfare in both the Atlantic and Pacific. In the Atlantic, Hedgehog-equipped escorts were decimating the remaining U-boat force. The German submarines that had terrorized convoys in 1940 to 1942 were now being hunted to extinction. The introduction of the Hedgehog, combined with improved sonar, radar, air cover, and code breaking, meant U-boats had almost no chance of survival. Statistics tell the story.
In 1942, before widespread Hedgehog deployment, it took an average of 245 depth charges to sink a submarine. By 1944, with Hedgehog widely deployed, a single attack often achieved a kill. The success rate per attack jumped from around 5 to 7% with depth charges to over 20% with Hedgehog. The psychological impact was equally important. Allied sailors who'd spent years terrified of submarines now had confidence that they could fight back effectively. Submarine hunting shifted from a defensive necessity to an offensive opportunity. Escort captains actively sought out submarines instead of merely trying to protect convoys.
For submarines, the ocean became a death trap. German and Japanese submariners knew that detection increasingly meant death. The old tactics, dive deep, go silent, wait for the depth charges to pass, no longer worked. There was no warning, no chance to evade, just a sudden, catastrophic explosion. The Hedgehog also influenced post-war naval development. The concept of ahead-throwing weapons became standard. Modern anti-submarine warfare still uses ahead-throwing weapons, though now they're typically rocket-propelled torpedoes rather than mortars. The principle remains: maintain contact, attack while you can still track the target, use weapons that only detonate on hits. The British Squid mortar, introduced later in the war, was essentially an improved Hedgehog with larger projectiles and automatic reloading. The American Weapon Alpha of the 1950s was a direct descendant. Modern ASROC systems trace their lineage back to Goodeve's original ahead-throwing concept. The USS England's 12-day rampage in May 1945 stands as one of the most remarkable achievements in naval warfare. 7 submarines destroyed in 12 days of active patrol, using a revolutionary weapon that had only been in service for 3 years. The ship's success wasn't just about the weapon,